Hello, Gemini, and welcome to Dharma, your 2020 spring reading from Planet Ways. My name is Eric Francis Coppolino here with some good news from your astrology, a few things to think about, and some ideas for life and love. Don't forget to check out the introductory video. We've put it on every page so you kind of can't miss it, and that lays out some of the underlying framework of the ideas I'm presenting. But here, I've got your Gemini reading for you. So noteworthy it is that Venus retrograde, the spring, takes place entirely in Gemini. And it is doing so with a lot of support from another point in Gemini called Vesta, which is going to move on pretty soon, but it's right there at the beginning of the Venus retrograde, and it's there now. And then a third point, which I have not mentioned in any of the prior videos yet, and that's called Asbolus. Did I mention it yesterday? I might have mentioned it yesterday. Okay, in Taurus. Who knows? A lot has happened since yesterday. Asbolus is a centaur planet, and that's spelled A-S-B-O-L-U-S, Asbolus. And it's been in your sign for a long time. I don't know how long, but it's been there for pretty much as long as I can remember. And so it's a slow mover, and it's directly involved in the process, and doing what all centaurs do is raising the intensity level of the whole experience. And you're the one who's likely to feel this the most poignantly, and also to experience it as the culmination of something that you've been going through for a long time. Because Asbolus has been in your sign for a long time, and that quality is a kind of a survivalist quality. This can manifest on a few different levels, but the idea of Asbolus is the thing that all life has in common, and the thing that all life has in common is the desire to live. Everything that lives wants to live. When something lives that doesn't want to live, that's an important time to check in with it, and there's likely to be some other thing going on, some generally mental or emotional situation. But even beings that are in pain and that are struggling tend to want to live. And so this can manifest in a few different ways. One of them is as a kind of a gritty survivalist quality, and another way is just an ability to tap into the flow of existence and the flow of life. And another is an ability to do what you need to do in order to get by. So this could kind of come in hot, medium, and mild, and you'll know more about that, obviously. And let's just remember that this point is in the background, of your astrology. So let's take a look at the chart here. I'm going to use the pen that matches my outfit today. And I got a couple of planets missing that I plan to draw in there, so pardon me 1 second while I add Chiron, Salacia, and Eris has already made it in. All right, so here's microphone. All right, so here's the chart that I'm working with. We'll provide a copy of this, and for this kind of project, I prefer to use handwritten, hand-drawn, kind of customized and artsy charts rather than computerized ones. Plus, much of this stuff is not available through the computerized charts. And we know the chart's Gemini because it starts with Gemini on the first house. So this is for Gemini rising, Gemini moon, and Gemini sun. And this is our point of orientation. Basically, everyone's going through the same astrology. It's just a question of where and how you orient that astrology that makes it meaningful in its particular way for you. And so what we have here in Gemini, let's get this even closer in, is Venus is right there, and Vesta is right there, and Aspolus is floating around out there somewhere, and there's the retrograde. Retrograde goes from May 13th through June 25th. It's about 6 weeks. Venus is very rarely retrograde, and therefore it's very rarely retrograde in any one sign. So to have Venus retrograde in your sign it's a mitzvah. It's an opportunity. It's a blessing, and it is a very important time of review. So now the world is starting to come out of this corona mania. At least corona mania is stage one. And one of the ways I've been offering to think about this is as a time of reflection and a time of introspection. And it is also something that's going to shift the dynamic of all relationships that exist, whether it's preventing people from getting together, whether it is keeping people locked in the same place for a long time, or for too long, or more than they want, or giving them the opportunity to be together almost all the time, if that works for you. Whether it is preventing people from meeting, whether it is shifting meeting to an online forum, whatever it's doing, it's shifting the dynamic of relationships. And this Venus retrograde in Gemini is about shifting the dynamic of relationships, and in particular, shifting the dynamic of your relationship with yourself, that encourages you to bring your whole concept of relationship into an inner reality. Vesta is about ultimately about the inner flame, tending that thing at the center of who you are, that vital force energy at the center of who you are, your sexuality, your creativity, your vital force, orgone, chi, whatever it might be called, that is ultimately you, that is ultimately your internal source of power that is connected to the great flame that is powering up all of this that we see and experience as life, including things we don't think of as alive, like stars and like atoms, but you are alive, and you are now being invited to make contact with this source of power within you. And in order to do that, you have to turn your attention inward. You have to bring your consciousness inward toward the center of yourself, so that you can align with and even notice that you have this sacred flame burning inside of you. And so it is perfection that Venus retrograde is happening in your sign, concurrent with the presence of Vesta, because Vesta is saying, look inwardly, but we don't normally do that in our culture and in our world, and it is particularly frightful that there is so much of our locus of identity drawn out of who we are through all of this electronic media that's making it difficult to focus inwardly, and making it difficult to have any internal coherence to our sense of being. And so one of the things that you are healing from is this overexposure to the digital realm, which has shifted your sense of who you are. It has shifted the whole world radically. It has transformed society and culture and our whole concept of intellect and our concept of self and our concept of relationships and our experience of all of these things, and more than anything, the nature and meaning of the physical body and our physical presence. And so the presence of Venus retrograde combined with Vesta is, let's say, a radical invitation to call your full attention to your inner life. Now, as this is going on over the next 6 weeks, I reckon we're going to be experiencing society attempting to bring its energy back outward and into the relational realm. And I would propose that you take that as slowly as possible and not rush matters, but go with the flow of this energy. Go with the direction that this is calling you. Now, one of the most striking things I've noticed many times about Vesta is that it is, when it's prominent in someone's chart, and we might say that it's the most prominent in your chart right now because of the fact that the Venus retrograde takes place in a conjunction to Vesta in Gemini, is that the pattern of relationships is different. So, for example, I think one of the most basic things you can say is that people tend to not have ordinary romantic partnerships, that doesn't really work out very well when people have a prominent Vesta in their chart. And so, while you may not have it natally, though it is possible that you do, you at least are having an experience of Vesta now that is a threshold experience. It's a life-altering experience to have this taking place right in your sun sign or rising sign or moon sign, and so one of the things that you can work with is the idea and the experience that there is no normal for you that matches the normal of everyone else, and that you will benefit from having a different set of expectations than perhaps your peers have, and perhaps even your partners have, and instead recognizing whatever the pattern of your relationships is, and whatever the landscape of your relationships is becoming at this time in your life, whatever it is shifting and altering into at this time in your life, is the thing to work with, to be present for the natural changes in the territory. And this may mean less emphasis on some form of a partnership, and it may mean a reduced emphasis on sex with other people. It may mean no sex with other people for a while, for some period of time. Let's just use the Venus retrograde as a general guide for how long that might last, or it might last until the next Venus Vesta conjunction, which takes place in Leo in a few months. I'm not sure what date that is. That's probably in the autumn. But they've made so far one conjunction. There'll be a second conjunction shortly after the retrograde in the third week of May, and then Venus will go retrograde, and then Vesta will keep going forward, and then they'll meet back up again in Leo in entirely new terms. But the idea here is that you are seeding and cultivating your relationship with yourself, and that as a result you have an opportunity to not be distracted by other concepts of relationship that take you away from first of all, your relationship to yourself, and also your relationship to your Dharma, to your commitment to the service that you offer and your commitment to holding the world together. Now, it's worth noting where Gemini is a factor that this is the most dualistic of the signs. In some ways, all of the signs present us with a concept of dualism that we have to work with, but the root of the matter is in Gemini. And so, for example, Taurus has dualism because there's a bull depicted and the bull has horns, and so you get a picture of a dilemma in Taurus, but you don't have anything quite like two humans representing one person, facets of one person. And so therefore the calling to engage fully in your interior relationship is very powerful and necessary calling right now. And I suggest you really follow it and go with it and get to know yourself. There is, by the way, an entire audio presentation where I focus on this, and I focus, it'll be connected to every one of these presentations. There is a language that you have with yourself, and I suggest that you work on this language and additionally work on your ability to communicate with yourself and to hear what you are saying to yourself and to understand what you are saying to yourself and to learn your inner language. Once you've done that, it then becomes possible to teach your inner language to other people and help them communicate with you in the specific way that you need to be communicated with. That is something that happens later on. That's a secondary factor compared to getting right with and in alignment with yourself. Now, one of the things that is so keep that in mind as the overarching theme of this. One of the things I've documented over time is that much of the chaos the internet is causing is coming from Aries. It's coming from Aries partly as an influence of Eris and Aries. Eris is a planet with a 558-year orbit. I've got my little chart of how long the orbits of the planets are up there. And let's adjust the light a little bit here and make a little more light on the subject. Hopefully I can go for one or two more videos this afternoon. And Aries is the sign where you seek your self-identity. And you have Aries, according to your solar chart. Your natal chart might be different. This is one valid version of your astrology, though. In the 11th, and the 11th is the house of your peers, your house of representing groups. And so there is something inherently true of Aries that is seeking its identity in groups, which is another way of saying outside of yourself. And this is such a natural part of your psychic architecture that it's not even necessarily the kind of thing that you've given a name to or that you've organized your thoughts around. So this is one reason why we have the benefit of astrology is to give us a metaphor and a model to be able to seek a level of understanding. And so this is a very pronounced state of being for you, particularly in the past few years, where there has been so much going on in Aries, and therefore so many opportunities to be drawn out of your inner awareness and into a consciousness that is associated with society itself. Much of this is happening on the internet, I would note, and that even our most ordinary social interactions that we experience are being informed and driven by misinformed and done a disservice and answerable to the the deeper patterns of social dynamics that are being set in virtual space. And so what has happened is it has become harder and harder to tell your virtual self from your real self. It's become harder for everyone to tell their virtual self from their real self, and this has created an identity crisis. A couple of things have happened. One of the things that's happened is Chiron has arrived there. This has been over approximately the past 2 years, and Chiron spends the most time in Aries than it does of any other sign, a total of 9 years. And so we're now about to go into we're now in an approximately 7.5 or so year phase of Chiron being solidly in Aries. And one of the things that it describes is calling your attention to the dynamic that you have between yourself and the outer world around you. It's almost like putting a lens in front of the dynamic, so that suddenly you can see, notice, identify, and capture the essence of and recognize the way that participating in this environment for so long, for some of us, 25 years in this digital environment. For many people, their whole life, or most of their life, or every single day of their life. Teenagers growing up have been exposed to the internet since the day that they were born. And so what Chiron is doing is at least giving you a tool to grasp the dynamics when you experience them with the people around you and in the environment. So it's almost as if now there's a beacon in the digital environment saying, hold that thought, saying that you are in the digital environment. Be alert, be aware you are in the digital environment, and it is having an impact on you. It is changing you. It is affecting you in some way, and then these are the ways that it's doing so. So you have a way to be introspective through an outrospective mode. So it's very handy to have this, because without it, you might be lost in the digital environment. And now suddenly you can say, okay, now I understand where I am. I'm in the digital environment. It's a tremendous distortion. It's a tremendous distortion, and I can now recognize that, and this will make the journey of Venus retrograde in your sign all the more relevant. Now, one of the things that happens later in the year, there's 2 interplanet retrogrades. This, I believe, happened in 2018 in the reverse order. Mars is going to be retrograde in the autumn. So Venus is retrograde first in your sign, Gemini, and then to complete the project, you might say, to complete the learning, to complete the experience, Mars is going to be retrograde here. So in Aries, in Aries and in the 11th house. And so the dynamics are a very powerful setup of relationship to yourself, in contrast with your social experience, remembering that one of your strongest tendencies is to seek your self-identity through your social experience. Right? Am I making that point well enough? And this is very natural for you to do this. It's one of the reasons why you're so social. It's one of the reasons why it's so much fun to go to a Gemini party, because all the Geminis are having perfectly good time talking to everyone. There's no social awkwardness. They just room and start chatting with one another. I'm seeing my screen get jumpy. I'm hoping there's not any damage to the file. We will see. I don't really want to do this reading twice. And so the retrograde of Mars emphasizes this point yet again, that in a sense, you need to be introspective and self-aware and teach yourself self-awareness all the time, no matter what environment you are in, whether you are alone in your space, whether you are associating with others on the internet, whether you're just looking around on the internet, or whether you're in physical space with other people, and to notice and study the dynamics and the way in which self-concept is being shaped. Now, because Chiron is in Aries in your 11th house, that makes you very noticeable in any communal environment that you enter. In any group environment, you are kind of a beacon. You become a point of focus in that environment, and a lot of attention to you, and this will help because you're going to notice that there's all this attention being called to you. Apropos of the whole idea of Dharma, holding the world together really comes in two forms. The first form it comes in is keeping yourself together, unified, and in a coherent and loving relationship with yourself. This is not an easy task. There are a great many people who are divided against themselves and who really struggle to have any sense of internal cohesion or the ability to focus their will, their intention, or to get their whole being moving in one direction. The second form of Dharma generally involves the social realm, where people tend to be divided and at odds with one another, and then groups can form, and there can be all kinds of adharmic activity in groups, because groups can get together, and then people can be convinced that they're in some way infallible, or that this group has the right idea, and we're going to, no matter what we do, it's the right thing. So teams get like this, and companies and countries get like this, and you get the idea. You're working both ends of this. The retrograde of Venus in your sign is teaching you to resolve your differences with yourself and to form internal cohesion with yourself. Mars retrograde in Aries is saying that same thing on one level, but it's saying that the dynamic where this happens, the environment where this happens, is the larger outer world in which you live, and so that you are becoming an example and a beacon of healing as a presence in the social realm. And then that is going to have a catalyst effect on the people around you. So as part of the exercise of this whole set of astrological factors, I would encourage you to not participate in division in any way, to do everything that you possibly can to be a unified presence within yourself, and to foster unity in the world around you, and to not participate in this thing that is killing the world right now, is this artificial sense of division that is going on. Now, when astrology speaks, it tends to say the same thing over and over again, and that's one of the ways that that it's speaking the most clearly. And this theme of groups is gets even better. So you have the sign of groups, Aquarius, right here on your 9th house, house number 9, and Aquarius is always the 9th house of the ninth solar house of Gemini. And one of the most distinguishing factors of 2020 into 22, I think into 2023, is Saturn in Aquarius. The ninth house is the house of philosophy. It's the house of teaching. And it is the house of your concept of the future. It is the house of your philosophy of life. And to have Aquarius there, first of all, is saying that there's a crucial understanding of Aquarian energy associated with your whole philosophy of existence. Now, there's a lot of ways to take Gemini, and I talk about some of them in the introduction. The low vibration is a kind of a fascist vibration. I realize this doesn't get a line in the song "The Dawning of the Age of Aquarius." When the moon's in the seventh house and everyone's acting like Mussolini, that's not a line in the song, but it's very much a factor of Aquarius, and so you have to always watch the element of Aquarius that is about petty tyrants, and that means never being a petty tyrant, and also noticing when you are one. The higher vibration of Aquarius, in my opinion, is the ability to be impartial, to be objective, to factor many points of view into your point of view, to take ideas under consideration, to take ideas under advisement, without thinking that you have to choose sides. One of the massive fallacies in our society right now is everyone thinks that many people feel, believe, and act like the minute they encounter an idea, they must quickly either agree with that idea or disagree with that idea. And if they disagree, it's going to be really disagreeing. And if they agree, it's going to be really agreeing. And it's like way too much team spirit for anyone's health or sanity. And so what you want to do, in my opinion, with Saturn now about to be a long-term visitor to your ninth solar house, meaning that it is an assistant in your teaching process. It's going to be it is and presents you as an authority. Is to hold the space of being impartial. Don't fall for this game where you think that you have to just be in one camp or the other, in one bandwagon or the other. This is not about being indecisive. It is in fact about being decisive in a mature, sane, and healthy way, as opposed to an adolescent or childish way where there's all of this polarization going on. And so Saturn and Aquarius are deliberative, particularly in the ninth house, meaning that there's the ability to deliberate, to weigh and balance, and a commitment to being fair. This is crucial that you have this ability to be fair and that you cultivate this ability. All right. There's important material to cover in one more place, at least. And let's end with this. One of the reasons that the world is in this seemingly unmitigated shit show right now is that earlier in the year we experienced the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. Saturn and Pluto form a major alignment approximately every 18 or 19 years. So the last really big one was in 2001, 2002, and that was associated with the 9/11 debacle that that in many ways we're living with, and too many ways reliving right now. This whole coronavirus thing is just a little too 9/11ish for me, and the reason for that is it's the next stop in the cycle of Saturn and Pluto. And so the cycle of Saturn and Pluto tends to bring a contraction. It tends to bring an uprising of conservatism. It tends to bring a fear level that dominates reality. This is a very annoying thing about Saturn-Pluto contacts, is the fear level that is associated with it. And we're in one of these now, and there was a conjunction on January 12th, and so this is a shock. And where this exists in your chart is this house where the eighth house, where people in our society tend to have relationships that fit what I called at the beginning the conventional relationship model, which tends to include cohabitation, the exchange of sex, the exchange of money, and often the creation of children. That's the script. And the eighth house tends to be the house that combines sex and money through the concept of dowry. And it's also the house associated with death. So now, for quite a long time, you've had Pluto going through this house, which is basically, in some ways, in all ways, been challenging and potentially demolishing your concept of conventionality in relationships. During this time of demolishing, it also may have included times of obsession with partners, obsession with an idea, including obsession with the idea of marriage, which is a idea that many people are obsessed with, like that their only legitimate concept of relationship is a consecrated marriage partnership or some kind of marriage-like relationship. This has finally been challenged for you, and then bringing Saturn into the picture in late 2017, through all of 18, all of 19, and 2 parts of 2020. So Saturn in Capricorn is spreading out quite ways from the end of 17 to the end of 2020, though this is a transitional year, has been doing a lot of house cleaning and been challenging you to think of your relationships in different ways, to bring your relationships into a different construct than all of this heavy-handed stuff that has been delivered to you by your family. Right? It's very challenging to have to live with the relationship rules and strictures of the distant past, particularly when people are not admitting that in the distant past they didn't work as well as the fairy tales that we're told and the myths we're told about our family. And isn't it wonderful that our great-grandmother and great-grandfather were married for 60 years and lived to 80 and all this stuff, when in fact they maybe didn't even like each other very much, and they stayed together. The song "Do You Love Me, Do I What" from Fiddler on the Roof comes to mind, where Rev Tevye asks his wife, "Do you love me?" and she says, "Do I what?" This is a 8th house thing. And so you have had this territory challenged and softened up, and it's not going to hold the energy in the same kind of way that it had other times in your life. And this really begins around 2008, and it came to a peak in January of 2020. Okay. This is going somewhere. And where this is going is toward a more astrologically, where it's going is toward the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the first degree of Aquarius at the Capricorn solstice on 12/21/20. So it's two major conjunctions in 2020. The first one had the feeling of fracturing and ripping things apart. That's the Saturn conjunct Pluto. The second in Capricorn, the second conjunction takes place in the first degree of Aquarius and has the feeling of bringing people and things back together. So we're going to see healing of this social distancing thing, and I've encouraged all of us to decide what kind of society we want to live in, particularly Americans, to decide what kind of society that we want to live in. But it would be fair to say that the direction of your relationships are going is in a more egalitarian level. It is more focused on equal friendship than it is focused on possessive lovership. And that this is something that should come quite naturally to you, and it is likely to come naturally to you as you embrace your own self-possession. Because once you've made peace with yourself and bonded with yourself, as Venus retrograde conjunct Vesta in Gemini is going to teach you how to do, you're much less likely to want to give yourself away to an idea, to a person, to the past, to some concept of what the right thing is supposed to be, and much more inclined to want to live in relationships where you get to be yourself, one individual who is able to relate to another individual. Borrowing from Erica Jong, who says in the beginning of Fear of Flying, I want to be a whole person, not half of a relationship. And this should be feminism, should be humanism, should be the way that we think about ourselves as not being half of anything, but a whole entity, and this will give you, as you experience Venus retrograde and then Mars retrograde, and these things end, and then the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happens in Aquarius, a much stronger sense of your beingness and your self-presence on every level, such that you will understand that you simply don't want to compromise your existence for any purpose, for any person, for any idea. You are you. You relate to others as you, and that is your integrity. Okay, don't forget to check out your sign rising if it's not Gemini, or your sun if Gemini is your rising sign. Please share these videos with somebody you care about, and get the conversation going. Ideas increase by being given away, and so thanks for receiving these ideas, and for trusting me as your astrologer. Okay, and bye for now.